Hey guys, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys how I sewed up this no pattern needed corset that was draped on live the other day. And so I started off by, of course, taking the corset off of the dress form and separating all of the panels that we cut out. Now, you want to remember the patterns and the way that they're supposed to go. So I definitely recommend putting a notch at the top by just snipping just a little, a quarter into the material to know what's at the top, and also marking the sides by snipping into it as well. And then I went ahead and made some strips for my casings. I did 1.5 inches, but I definitely recommend at least doing like 1 3/4 so that you have a little extra room to play with. And I finally got some chalk, y'all. And so I went ahead and cut all those out. So this part is self-explanatory. Just cut out them strips. It doesn't necessarily have to be bias strips, because it's just the casing. And honestly, I like this cotton because it doesn't stretch too much. And so I know that all of my casings are going to be the same size, not pulling my fabrics. Next, I went ahead and started with the center. You all know that I didn't want it to just be the horsehair material because I didn't want it to be too shiny. So I went ahead and cut out 2 pieces of illusion mesh to put over it so that it gives that matte finish. And so I just started sewing around the perimeters. Typically, honestly, I don't sew around perimeters because I like to just get my projects done. But sew around your perimeters so that your materials, especially if you have an overlay on the mesh, on that horsehair mesh, you want to keep everything in place. You do not want things shifting all over the place, or even pleats and bubbles in your corset. That is not pleasing and is not sexy, okay? So yeah, go ahead and sew around the perimeters, and then we're going to start joining our pieces together. Also, another thing, y'all, cut them strands. Y'all going to see me cut strands a few times in this video. Cut your strands, okay? Nobody wants to see garments with loose strands and stuff like that. Make sure you're cutting as you're going. And so I sewed these pieces right side front. So I did not sew them towards the inside because I wanted the exposed boning look. So I went ahead and sewed them front sides together and started trimming down, the excess mesh that was on top. And here you can see I'm adding the casing. I did sew at the same seam allowance that I have everything else, which is 1/2 inch. You can do this on the inside as well, y'all. Y'all don't have to have it exposing on the outside. It can still give the same effect on the inside. I personally just like to do it top. And so in the seam allowance, you want to go ahead and trim off that excess mesh underneath, because you want all of your bonings cases to be the same size. You don't want all of them to like be missized and it's like all over the place. So I'm going to show you guys how it's going to look when I fold it. This is before I added the boning. So now we're going to go ahead and sew up all the other pieces. And add all the casings to each panel. When you're sewing these casings, make sure they're going towards the seam allowance. You don't want it to go the other way because then the top stitch is going to be on that side. And it just looks a little more flattering when it's all facing towards the seam allowance. And that goes for both sides. So if the casing is on on the right side of that center, it should be going towards the right side seam. If it's on the left, it should be going towards the left side seam. And I use the sew through boning at a 1/2 inch. Now you have different options. I personally is more stable when I do it this way. And of course you leave a little space at the bottom and at the top because you still need seam allowance to do your final hems on the top and the bottom. And you can also just sew down the casing and then go ahead and slip it through. I personally don't do it that way often because I want it to be even on all sides, and I don't want to be fighting with this thing when the time comes to be sliding it through. And so here you can see how it looks with it folded like this, and bam, it looks so clean. And so I did a little fit check to make sure that we're going in the right direction, and we are. And so you're gonna go ahead and add all the rest of your boning to these panels. And for the hip area, you want to go ahead and do the full front, the full back, and then do the casing on that side seam. And then we're going to go ahead and add the boning there. Don't spend too much time trying to pin, but you know what? I take that back. I can't tell you what to do. Do what's most comfortable for you. But y'all can see how clean it looks. I like to do it as I go, like just folded it in. And so this was the final. I am very pleased with it. I know that center one is a little off, and that's because when you're doing the casing for the center, you should go a little before the seam allowance, not necessarily following the seam allowance, but it's okay because it's getting covered anyways. So thank you for joining me, and in the next video, I'll show you guys how to do the bust cups. Let me know what you think about this tutorial and if there's anything else that you want to learn so that I can make it for y'all.